All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. So we are continuing in today's Mishna Yomi, Berachos, Mishna is Hey through Vav, chapter 8, Mishna is 5 through 6. So Mishna Hey says as follows: Beishamai Omer, Beishamai say, Ner umazon b'samim v'havdalah. So just a bit of context for this case. So the Bartanura explains that we're talking about the following situation. He says, Misha achal b'shabbos b'mincha, v'adayin lo gamar seudaso, ve'ein lo yayin ela shir kol sechad. Here's the case. A person ate shalosh shudis. Now Shabbos has come to an end, but the person has not yet benched. And the person only has 1 cup of wine, which means that a person has to use the same cup of wine both for benching as well as for havdalah. So now the question is going to be, in front of that person, you have a number of brachos. You have benching, you have brei pri hagafen, you have the bracha of ner, borei ma'orei ha'ish, the bracha of bisamim, borei mine bisamim, and the bracha of hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol. So these are all of the brachos you have. The shaila, of course, becomes which order should one recite these brachos. So Beishamai says the proper order is ner mazon b'samim havdalah. Make the bracha borei ma'orei ha'ish, benching b'samim, and then havdalah. Now I'll say what I'll point out. Let's work backwards. At the end of the day, the Bartanura says everyone agrees that havdalah is always going to be the last bracha that is made. And what's the reason for that? The lashon of the Bartanura is da'afuke yoma ma'achrinan le kechidol havi kemasui. That we always delay the official departure of Shabbos. To whatever degree we could delay the official departure of Shabbos, we do so that Shabbos shouldn't look like a burden. So by definition, havdalah is always going to be at the end. The machlokes we're going to see is what's the proper order ultimately of ner, mazon, besamim. See, interestingly enough, Beishamai holds that halacha l'maisa, you should really first go ahead. Now, one more piece. Everyone is going to agree that ner comes first, right? And the reason why ner comes first is because halacha l'maisa is, I have it over here, he says, since one gets automatic benefit from the ner as soon as it's brought, therefore by definition it makes sense to go ahead and make the bracha on that first. So it's interesting in this machlokes, in this bills we're going to see, is that everyone agrees on the bookends. Ner, borei ma'orei ha'ish will come first, right? And ultimately, again, even though that's not how we pass in halacha l'maisa, but ner will come first and havdalah will come last, right? So that they're agreeing on the bookends. The machlokes is everything in the middle. So Beishamai holds that halacha l'maisa, you should go ahead and first recite benching and then the bracha of bisamim. And Beishamai's logic is, just read to you, Shemei achar shekvar achol mischai berachos hamazon. Beishamai says, listen, you already ate. Therefore, by definition, it makes sense to recite benching first. So therefore, I will say, in Beishamai's model, you'll start with ner, because since the ner, the candle is already there, it makes sense to begin with it, right? You're benefiting from the light as soon as it's brought. Then you'll bench, because halacha l'maisa, you already have an obligation for benching. Then bisamim, and then havdalah last, because to whatever degree we could delay the official departure of Shabbos, we do so. Beis Hillel, on the other hand, what do they say? Ner, same idea. We're going to go ahead and make the bracha of borei ma'orei ha'ish first, because again, at the end of the day, one is benefiting from that light. Now here they disagree a little bit. So both say, ultimately, Beis Hillel says, ner and bisamim are kind of linked. They're Havdalah sisters, right? So because they're Havdalah siblings, they always go together. So once I know that I'm making the bracha on the ner first, by definition, Havdalah will come after that. Then ultimately, again, mazon, benching, and then Havdalah last, because you want to delay the official departure of Shabbos. Good. Beishamai Omer. So that's that machlokes. Now again, we actually pass a little bit differently, halacha l'maisa, in all of this regard. But that's the machlokes over here. Fine. Beishamai Omer. Beishamai says, Shebara ma'or ha'ish. So we'll say, now they have another machlokes in the actual verbiage of the bracha of on the ner, on the candle of Havdalah. So Beishamai says the bracha that is said is bara ma'or ha'ish. So Beishamai says you can't say borei because borei sounds like present future. On Shabbos, the reason we're going ahead and making Havdalah, using a ner for Havdalah is a twofold reason. Number one, because historically fire was created on Motzei Shabbos. And number two, remember halacha l'maisa, one was not permitted to get benefit from the ner all of Shabbos. So, but really the primary motivation here is that fire historically was created on Motzei Shabbos. So Beis Shammai therefore says the proper verbiage is Shabara Ma'ar Ha'ish. Hashem created the fire. Beis Hillel omrim Borei Ma'ore Ha'ish. Beis Hillel says no, Borei also has a connotation of past, and he brings it. So first of all, number one, he says you can use Borei. Number two, he says you should use Ma'ore. Why? Because within the fire is contained what appears to be many different flames. It's an interesting machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. So again, Beis Shammai is saying Shabara Ma'ar Ha'ish. Beis Hillel saying Borei Ma'ore Ha'ish. Of course, we'll be passing like Beis Hillel, and we say Borei Ma'ore Ha'ish. Beautiful. We'll say next Mishnah Vav. Ein mevarchen lo al haner v'lo ala b'sam shel ovdei kochavim. So we'll say another interesting halacha. For Havdalah, you cannot use the candle, nor can you use the besamim of ovdei kochavim, of ovdei avodah zarah, of idolatry. And I will say now, the logic for that is as follows. You can't use the ner, because interestingly enough, for Motzei Shabbos, you have to use what we call a ner sheshavas, which means a fire that was not used for malacha over the course of Shabbos. So bepashtos, the ner of an ovdei kochavim was used for malacha on Shabbos, therefore one can't use it. Right? And the idea behind that, by the way, is that as you just mentioned before, there's a dual symbolism to the fire of Havdalah. Number one, that fire historically was created on Motzei Shabbos, and number two, to highlight the fact that all of Shabbos I was not permitted to use a ner. Now I am permitted to use a ner. So remember again, therefore the Mishna says to use the ner of an Ovid Kochavim of idolatry. Bepashtos, that ner was used for malacha over the course of Shabbos, and therefore I can't use it for Havdalah. What about Besamim? So I'll say, so Besamim, the idea is, you're not allowed to use it. Why? Because interestingly enough, here, a quote to you, in the Perish over here, he says, "Hakavano chila besamim shehufu besuda gidola sheovdi kochav mesubim ba suda kizu haisen ne'arachas b'dar klal l'shem avodah zarah." The Gemara explains we're talking about the type of besamim, which means like aromatic spices that were often used during the su'uda for idolaters. And that su'udah, that meal, often had religious connotations to it. So we're talking about besamim that was used in the context of religious worship. So once it's used in the context of religious worship, of course you're not allowed to use it for any purpose, right? It becomes what we call asr ba'ana, prohibited for any kind of use. Good. V'lo ala ner, v'lo ala besam shal mesim. You also can't use the ner, the candle, or for that matter the besamim, aromatic spices used for the dead. Now, what is this referring to? If you take a look at the Bartanura, he says, "V'lo al haner shal mesim to los avid laora el lekavod ba'alma." So we'll say, so this is the type of candle that ultimately. So remember again, it's still customary today to light a candle by the deceased. Halacha l'maisa, one cannot go ahead and get hana'ah, can get benefit from this type of candle. Furthermore, this type of light is not kindled for illumination purposes, but rather it is kindled for kavod hames purposes, honor of the dead purposes. Because of that, one should not use it for Havdalah, because the light of Havdalah is supposed to be a light of illumination. And you can't use besamim shal mesim, because remember again, why do they historically put besamim by the corpse? To remove bad odor, right? So it wasn't done to create positive odor, it's done to remove bad odor, and therefore one should not use it for Havdalah. Good. V'lo ala besamim shlefnei avodah zarah. V'lo ala ner, v'lo besamim shlefnei avodah zarah. Furthermore, one should not use a candle, nor should one use besamim that were used for avodah zarah, right? They are placed before idolatry. Okay, and the last halacha, Rabbosai, ve'id mevarchen ala ner, ad she'usu la'oro. And last halacha, one should not go ahead and make a bracha borei ma'ore ha'ish until one gets benefit from the light. And Rabbi said this is actually an important halacha. That the idea is that one is not supposed to say the bracha until one benefits from it. Now, what does it mean one benefits from the light? So it's interesting, in the Perush, he writes over here, he quotes from the Rosh, that Nagu lehistakel b'tzipornayim b'shashim avarchen alaner, laharosh yachal lechanos imenu lahafkim min be'abel. So it's like the definition of getting benefit from the light, the Gemara explains that there's enough light to be able to distinguish between different kinds of coins. Right? That's what it means to get hana. So now, remember, how do we do this? In other words, so we'll say, interestingly enough, what it is it's not that you actually have to benefit from the light as much as it is that there has to be enough light that you could benefit from it. What's the definition of enough light to benefit from it? Enough light to be able to distinguish between different types of coins. The Rush points out that the truth is, the way we do this is, we make sure there's enough light to distinguish between the nail and the we'll call it the skin on your finger, right? Even though they look similar, that there's enough. That's why, again, by Havdalah, what we do is we look at, right, so there's different minhagim, but Mishna brings down, right, I look at my nails and like this, right? Again, one extends the fingers, one bends the fingers, but I just want to point out, I mentioned this before, it's not like some type of thing over here that I'm just waving my hands, right? The idea is, halachically, the goal is I'm supposed to be able to, that's why, again, I mentioned this a little while ago, if you're somewhere and you're standing, 50 feet away and you start moving your hands back and forth, that's fine, but that has nothing to do with Havdalah. That's your own business, between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? But the idea over here is you're supposed to be standing close enough to the nair that one is able to distinguish between their fingernail and the skin. The bearer says, Yosem mishar dvarim. So why the nails? Why the nails, not other things? This is incredible. So why my nails? So the Perushi, quoting over here from the Rabbeinu Yonah, who says very simply, he says because it's always available. It's always available, right? In other words, that it's as opposed to coins which you may or may not have in your pocket on Motzei Shabbos, right? By the time you're making Havdalah, your fingers and your nails are right there. So it's the easiest way to go ahead and quote unquote get benefit from the nair itself. Good, I will say, we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up with Mishna Zayin. Mishna Zayin and Ches tomorrow. Shkoyach.